And Mr. Bradsher, further questions for this witness?
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Blitzer, before I get back to discovery, I wanted to ask you a couple of follow-up questions. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
First, I hand you what's remarked as Defendant's Exhibit 6. Can you identify the email addresses on that between yourself and Melinda Richardson? Your AA starts from the bottom on a chain.
The address is melinda.w.richardson@nccourts.org. And from Melinda Richardson to Monday, May 22nd, 2017, to David Whitley, forward from Majid.
And if you could look at the middle of the document, do you see your email address where you would have received an email from Melinda Richardson?
I see a from me, from my name, not an address.
Okay, from Craig Blitzer.
Blitzer Craig M., yes.
All right, and you see the time on the Melinda Richardson email. Did you start with time and date, what it says?
May 22nd, 2017, Monday, 11:22 a.m.
That's at the top. It's forwarded to another agent. But starting from the bottom, you see an email sent from Melinda Richardson to you.
On Tuesday, March 7, 2017, 10:48 a.m. I don't know what the 0500 is.
But is this not an email from Melinda Richardson to you?
Yeah.
All right. And the date of this email would be what?
March 7th.
Okay, and the time Melinda Richardson would have sent the message to you is what time?
Well, it says 10:48 a.m. minus 0500, so, 10:48 a.m. minus 0500.
All right, do you recognize your email address in a response to Melinda Richardson?
I do not see my email address. I see my name.
Okay. Do you recall now looking at Defendant's Exhibit 6? In fact, Melinda Richardson, your AA, sent you an email telling you that Mashid Kazan.
Sustained.
Isn't it true? Melinda Richardson sent you an email telling you Mashad Kazan.
Sustained as to the contents of the email.
May we approach?
Yes. Question, but I'll allow you to rephrase it.
Mr. Blitzer, I haven't looked at Defendant's Exhibit 6. Does that refresh your recollection now that you in fact received communication from your AA regarding Rashad Hassan?
Yes,
All right? What does it refresh in terms of your recollection?
I don't understand what you're asking.
Well, earlier this morning, you had recalled that you weren't notified by Melinda Richardson that Rashad Hassan had called, but that rather you had texted directly with Rashad Hassan.
No, I didn't say that.
All right? Now that you've seen that email, can you tell me what was your first notice that Rashad Hassan was calling you?
The unrestricted number on my cell phone that I called back and got Mr. Hassan's voicemail.
Having looked at the exhibit, isn't it true that Ms. Richardson sent you an email?
Yeah,
And isn't it true that you responded to that email and that you said thanks?
yes.
Okay. May I approach the witness again?
Yes.
It's the same one. With regards to Defendant's Exhibit 7, do you recognize your email address on there?
Yes.
And who is that an email between, if you know?
Purports to be from me to you.
All right, and what's the date of that email communication?
Thursday, January 15th, 2015, 8:40 a.m.
And what is the subject?
Meeting.
All right. And when does it say the meeting is going to occur between you and me, or do you recall who?
Just says meeting.
All right.
We're all set for Tuesday at 12:30. Thanks, smiley face.
All right. And do you recall sending this email on the 15th of January?
I have no idea when I sent it. I mean, the date says sent January 15th, but
All right.
I'm guessing I sent it that day.
All right. Thank you. May I show you what's been marked? This is Exhibit 5. May I approach the witness again? Your Honor?
Yes.
And what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit number 5, and ask for you to look at it for a second. Does Defendant's Exhibit 5 refresh your recollection as to the date of employment of Pam Bradsher in your office?
Yeah, it looks like I sent the email January 13th. Well, Pam Bradsher responded to it, I guess another email, and says, Dear Mr. Blitzer, I accept your offer of employment for the VWLA position under the terms that you set forth in your letter. So I guess she's responding to a letter that I mailed or emailed that's not on here.
Right. And do you recall now when the official start date as Pam Bradsher as your employee and Cindy Blitzer as my employee occurred?
Well, what do you mean when you say official? I mean, obviously, we had conversations before that, the email you just showed me. But I guess if by official you mean when AOC said yes, then whatever the date AOC said yes is.
Okay, so you don't recall specifically?
Not the exact date, no.
Okay. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes. Understood.
Mr. Blitzer, I'm handing you what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit number 8. You recall this morning we were talking about the But you had told the SBI that you had done coursework for your wife. Do you recognize this email from yourself to your wife with an attachment?
I recognize the email addresses, but not the attachment.
Okay. What is the email address?
Well, the from looks like it's my state address,
Meaning state email?
right?
Okay.
But I don't know what the attachment is.
And the recipient address?
It's
that
a,
one you recognize as your wife's?
yes, it was a joint one that she and I shared at home.
So the attachment, schoolwork about medical stuff, you don't recognize?
I don't know if this is a case or what this is.
Okay. Having looked at this, do you recall what you were doing December 3rd, 2015?
Not at all, sorry.
Okay. And in terms of sending, you did see there were attachments. I know you said you didn't recognize the attachments, but you sent Cindy a document with attachments. Is that correct?
According to the first page, there was two documents attached, but I don't know if it was what you have back there.
All right. So this document, you don't recall whether you prepared that as part of Cindy's assignments or not?
I don't recall.
Okay. Now, we were talking right before break about discovery. How many years did you do criminal defense, even up to capital defense work?
Just under, including prosecution, 22 years.
Right. And could you describe to the jury the general requirements of discovery in criminal cases as you understood it?
Essentially, there's no such thing as trial by ambush. Everything the state has to be provided to the defense or his or her lawyer. There is generally a two-way street, but because of some constitutional and statutory requirements, not everything that the defendant has, goes that way. But I can't think of, sitting here, anything that the state comes across that they do not have to turn over to the defendant or his or her lawyer.
And so in your years as a defense attorney, that's one perspective on discovery. You're trying to get it. Is that right?
Yes,
to
sir.
defend your client. Then once you became, well, actually, you were an assistant DA before you were an elected DA.
Yes, sir.
So what years were you an assistant DA?
January of 96 to May of 98.
And was that in the Rockingham office?
Yes.
Okay. So you already had experienced the requirements of discovery from an ADA's perspective. Is that right?
Sure.
And then you also experienced the requirements of discovery as a criminal defense attorney, even including capital litigation. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Then once you became the elected DA, did you tell the jury what your responsibilities would be with regards to discovery, providing discovery to defense attorneys?
From my office, there had been some very high-profile cases where defendants were sent to death row and later acquitted. So in response to that, the North Carolina General Assembly essentially created statutes that created felonies for law enforcement not to turn over information to the prosecutor, and made it felonies and misdemeanors, depending on the bracket, for the prosecutor not to turn that over to the defendant. So with that in mind, my office, like most offices, had what was commonly referred to as an open file discovery, which means every piece of paper, every note, every sticky note, they get a copy of. Every photo, every video, every audio, everything. Nothing is held back. And that was my policy.
And Phil Berger Jr. was the elected DA prior to you. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
When you took over the office, was there a system in place with regards to electronic discovery
For me,
for your office? Yes.
Rockingham County, because of its small size, was I don't want to use the word test county, but we were kind of a test county to reduce expense and copying costs. AOC, the Administrative Office of the Courts, started allowing smaller counties to upload the discovery and then send it to the defendant electronically. So we weren't, I mean, as you could imagine, a lot of stuff could get lost simply by the transfer of paper. So Rockingham, under my predecessor, were using, it was called the DAS system, DAS. They started using that, and it was in place when I took over.
But you have experienced the system that's just paper with the old bait stamp, where they are bait stamping every
Oh, yeah.
page
Yes, sir.
paper.
Yes.
And the Rockingham system, isn't it true, was unique that it had a cover page that set out certain things that law enforcement would fill in regarding the case, in addition to transmitting the discovery materials?
There was, if I recall correctly, some sort of internal form that some DAs used. I believed it was adversarial between the prosecutor and law enforcement, and was a way, quite frankly, in a trial for the prosecutor to stand up and say, well, Judge, they didn't give it to me. So I don't believe I used that form, the checklist.
All right. You had a
You're
scanner.
talking about that felony report type form checklist?
Yes.
Yeah.
The scanner you had, even if law enforcement brought paper, they could not present paper. They would scan it in the lobby. Is that correct?
Right. When I was sworn in January 1st of 2015, I had been in so many different counties, and had, what Mr. Bradsher stated was, prior to scanning, every page would get a number with a stamp machine. And some counties had cases that had multiple jurisdictions involved, so you would wind up with discovery with 5-page number 12s and 5-page number 20s. And it was a nightmare to keep track of. So when I was sworn in, I did away with that number and did away completely. My office would not accept paper discovery. You had to either bring us a CD, a DVD, a thumb drive, a media card, or you could scan it in our office. But I didn't take paper because of the reasons I just stated, and I also didn't want to tie up my staff standing there scanning 300, 2,000 pages.
So that was my next question. Having experienced this digital discovery, it did substantially reduce workload once you had a system in place, didn't it?
I think it did for me. Yes, sir.
Now, with regards to this digital discovery, if it's received from law enforcement digitally, then you could in turn deliver it to defense attorneys digitally. Is that correct?
Yes, the only thing, what I changed was law enforcement agencies were emailing us the discovery. I stopped that because it was email limited, and then you're back to breaking up large packets. And the DAS system was limited in its memory, and you could not upload photos or videos. So the only thing we could transmit electronically to defense counsel was paper.
All right. So under the AOC system, as you took the office, it had a limited capacity to accept digital discovery, but isn't it true there was also a limitation if there was a video of more than a minute or two, that's something the officer would still have to hand deliver?
Yeah, I don't believe we could upload any video or photos.
Do you recall at the Ocracoke conference, Judge Marion Warren being present and talking about digital discovery?
I do.
And do you recall that at that time that I had been developing a paperless office modeled after the beginnings of Mr. Berger and your discovery system?
I know we had some conversation about it, yes.
All right. In fact, do you recall that in the actual engagement letters with regards to Pam and Cindy, that we addressed that we were going to make an effort to look at best practices during this time period between the districts.
Yes.
Isn't it true that actually Pam found out things that y'all were doing a certain way in Rockingham, and Cindy experienced certain things we were doing in our district? Isn't that right?
Yes.
So I want to jog your memory. Do you recall that, in fact, Pam was working at your direction for a couple of months before she went to PCC in Person County, doing discovery and starting the implementation of that system?
I'm not saying that didn't happen, but it would take an hour. I just told them how to do it. I mean, it's you buy a scanner, you buy a good version of Adobe, and you're good to go.
And so all of your law enforcement agencies in Rockingham were complying with the digital discovery?
Well, I made it a point of having very good working relationships with the sheriff and my chiefs, and got this in place long before I was sworn in. They all agreed that the bait stamp system was rather adversarial and resulted in a lot more finger pointing in court as to why there was a missing page, and were very receptive to the newer system. All you had to do was count the pages once, made sure that your scanner had the same number that you counted, and there it was.
And so did you proceed to the next step of going to a paperless office to where even the files then become digital?
I wouldn't say we went to a paperless office. I mean, I can only speak, I didn't dictate any mandates how my assistants prepared their cases. Me personally, I stayed in digital format until I had to try a case, and then just believed in saving whatever trees I could save.
All right. Let me ask the previous question this way. Will you at least agree that Pam Bradsher was in Person County working discovery in the last 2 months before she went to PCC?
With the caveat that I don't think it would take 2 months to set up, sure.
And Tyler Henderson, wouldn't you agree he was a shared employee to develop this system?
Well, when you say shared, that leads me to believe that he was working for or doing stuff related to Rockingham, and he wasn't.
Don't you recall at the Ocracoke conference the discussion about my system to present statewide for the Conference of DAs?
I'm not saying you didn't. I don't remember.
All right. So Tyler Henderson comes to your employ, and based on your recollection, it didn't have anything to do with talent sharing, shared employee, or a new discovery system?
No, because other than the one time he came to find me at the college, I never saw him.
Okay. Well,
I don't even know if he had a key card. I mean, I guess he did, but I would assume he did.
all right. So as his boss, your testimony is you had no idea what he was doing.
Well, my testimony is, as his boss, I lent him to you to supervise on a daily basis.
I see. Do you know who would have approved his beacon?
I would guess Melinda.
Okay. And that would be based on his representations of work
To Melinda.
to Melinda.
Yes.
All right? Because Melinda wouldn't see him every day, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And as the elected DA, you felt comfortable with that?
You told me you were supervising him, and I believed you were supervising him.
All right. And when I came in March 2016 to get the Shockley file, you didn't tell me anything was different with Cindy either, did you?
What do you mean?
Well, she had an office. She was there in the office. You didn't tell me she had stopped coming to the office, did you?
No.
So do you know when she stopped going to the office?
I could speculate it was probably early April, but I'm just guessing late March.
All right. Just wanted to go, before I go back to your statement, you, in that meeting that you say that I said things, when I got the Shockley file. Do you recall us talking about Jay Stoltz running for judge?
I think so.
In your statement, you do say that I tell you at that meeting that Jay Stoltz is the supervisor, right?
In March of 16, yes.
Do you recall us talking about that he was running for judge, and I asked how much longer it was going to be for Cindy transitioned out?
Again, I'm not saying you did, I just don't recall it.
Well, when did she get accepted to nursing school?
I think accepted, I don't know the acceptance date. I believe she physically started going April of 16.
So it would have been after the meeting in the Shockley.
Yes.
All right. Do you recall if you said in your statement that you told me at this meeting that she had started full-time nursing school?
I may have, I don't recall. I
See-
mean, it's over 2 years ago.
All right. So you don't know whether you told me that or not?
I may have, I don't remember.
Okay. All right. Now, when you were talking with the SBI, do you remember telling them that you assumed that Wallace Bradsher was her supervisor? Is that right?
If that's what it says.
Okay. And do you recall telling them that Cindy Blitzer would use the Rockingham office to use her computer?
Yes?
Did you tell the SBI when she entered full-time nursing school?
During my meeting with them?
Yes.
I don't know.
Well, when we transitioned and Pam went to PCC and then you hired Tyler, do you recall having any conversation with me about continued employment of your wife?
She was already working for you.
Okay, so there would be no reason to talk about it, right?
We talked about hiring Tyler.
Right. We didn't talk about continued employment of your wife. She was already working, right?
Yes.
Okay. And that's what you told the SBI, isn't it?
If you want me to read it, I can read it. I don't remember.
Well, yesterday, I think, you said that hiring Tyler was because of a phone call from me that if you don't hire Tyler, then I'm not going to keep employing your wife. I never said that, did
And I
I?
never testified to that. I said
Okay.
that I got the implication
Okay.
that with that Miss Bradsher working for me and my wife working for you, call it what you like, there was a little bit of a yin and a yang security there. I couldn't imagine you firing my wife while your wife was working for me. Once your wife left my employment, and now you're rather insistent that I hire Tyler Henderson at a significant raise, my wife works for you. It's difficult for me to say, gee, Wallace, I'm not so sure that's a good idea.
So it isn't true that we discussed a shared employee program that would go on for a temporary basis?
With Tyler?
Yes.
No, my understanding was Tyler was getting paid from the Rockingham County budget assigned to Caswell County for your use and pleasure.
After the Ocracoke trip, where you've indicated in the driveway, I say, don't worry about working. You come home and you tell Cindy that even before you get home. Is that right?
I believe I said, I'm sure I did, yes.
Okay. So what I want to nail down before I move on to the next subject is, from that first week in April until you go see the attorney in June, do you and Cindy discuss at all the fact she's not working?
I'm sure we did.
Did you ever call me or Jay Stoltz?
I don't believe I did. I seem to recall Cindy made some attempts.
Well, the state asked you that in general. I kind of want to nail that down. Did you see Cindy call Jay Stoltz
See her?
after the Ocracoke trip?
See her? No.
All right. Did you see her call my office?
No.
Rockingham County, where y'all live, is about how far from the Caswell office?
Oh, 20, 25 minutes, give or
Okay.
take.
Did she ever take a day and drive to Caswell County and say to Jay Stoltz that you know of, hey, I don't have any work to do?
Well, not that I'm aware of, but
Okay,
I made that very clear to you in April.
I see. So you told her that and thought it was okay for her to continue to not work and enter her beacon hours?
Well, based on representations that you had told me, yes.
So Cindy did not reach out to anyone after you told her that?
Asked me if I saw her dial your phone. I did not see her dial any number. I don't stand and watch what number she dials.
Okay, let's ask it this way. March, April, May, June, until you go see your lawyer, did you ever see her do any work?
No,
Did you ever express any concerns to her about entering beacon hours that she didn't perform?
I'm sure I did.
Okay. When she got the paycheck, did that come into y'all's account?
However the direct deposit was, I'm sure it did.
Okay. And you don't recall any time during those 4 months you calling Jay Stoltz or me?
I am almost certain I would not have called you or Jay Stoltz after the conversation in your driveway.
Do you recall telling Mark Keeney that in the early summer of 2016, around this time frame, that you and your wife were having major financial problems?
Yes,
Isn't it true you related to him that you had gone to use a credit card at a store, Home Depot perhaps, and it didn't work?
yes,
And isn't it true that you also shared that Cindy had spent $75,000 to $100,000 of the money that you had in the account? Is that right?
yes.
So did you go further and talk with Mr. Keeney about problems in your relationship with Cindy and even about divorce?
Probably.
Did those financial issues contribute at all in your decision not to say anything about this non-work issue
To you or to Cindy?
to me or Jay Stoltz?
Oh, I'm sure it did.
Okay. I can't ask you what Cindy thought, but was Cindy aware, based on your knowledge and experience with her during this time period, that there were financial problems?
I'm sure she did. She created him.
Okay, fair enough. And you confided in Mr. Keeney quite frequently, didn't you?
Yes,
All right. And do you recall where you were in the early summer of 2016 when you would have had this conversation with Mr. Keeney?
courthouse, I guess.
Courthouse? Okay. All right. So, are you still going to work at the DA's office at this time? This time where you're having financial trouble, you're going and working,
Yes.
right? Is that
Yes.
right? And Tyler Henderson's working, is that right?
I don't know.
But your AA is approving the time, is that right?
I don't know.
Okay. And with regards to Cindy working, though, you know?
I know that we got a paycheck.
Okay. But you were able to answer the state that she wasn't doing any work.
I don't understand your question then.
Well, you're going to court or the office every day, right?
Me?
Yes.
Yes.
And she wasn't?
In June of 16?
March, April, I'm sorry, not March. April, May, June of 16.
No.
She's not going at all.
She may have come sporadically.
Okay. You go to work, she stays home, is that right?
Essentially.
And 2 days a week, she's going to school, is that right?
Correct.
So that's another thing I wanted to clear up. Could you tell the jury what her schedule would be every week Once she got accepted to this full-time nursing program?
I have no idea. It changed. They were mini masters, 8, 10 weeks. It changed all the time.
Did she ever go more than 2 days a week?
I don't know.
You had actually written to Megan Lively at the Conference of District Attorneys about Kyle Ambrose going to BLET with you, didn't you?
I testified to that earlier.
And you confirmed that non-standard work hours were fine, right?
Yes.
In fact, in that email notice to you, strike that, Your Honor. I'm listening. Pursuant to your investigation with Megan Lively at the Conference of District Attorneys, you were on notice that the 40 hours just had to be done. It could be done during non-standard time, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, having talked with the Conference of District Attorneys about the Kyle Ambrose issue, you certainly were aware that Cindy should be doing the hours that she's logging.
Well, Beacon won't let you log non-standard hours.
Correct. And isn't it true we discussed that at the March meeting?
We did.
Her inability to log hours was the way it was set up was a Monday through Friday, 8 to 5.
Correct.
Okay. But never at that meeting did you say, but she's not really working those hours, did you?
She wasn't my employee. You didn't ask.
Okay, well, but you testified before, all the way up to this point, she was working.
Up until the Shockley case was removed, yes.
Okay. So at the March meeting, presumably she had been working, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
So why would I say she wasn't?
Exactly. Now, you said that Tyler Henderson came and saw you in September, is that right?
I tend to think it was more in August, but it's somewhere around that frame, late August, early September, when shortly after, I think, either Agent Whitley or Agent Mays made contact with you or your office.
Before I go back to that, was there any time towards the summer of 2016 up until Cindy's termination that those financial problems had been resolved?
Fiscally or in our marriage?
Fiscally.
No.
Okay, so in terms of still needing to get that paycheck, Cindy and you still needed to get that paycheck, given the financial situation that
We
existed? Okay. All right, Tyler Henderson, the employee that you never see, shows up and you see in September?
It could have been late August. It was shortly into the BLET program, which started August 12th. I'm not sure if it was late August or early September, but I tend to think it was more toward late August. Whenever the SBI made contact with your office was when he came running.
Did you ever talk to Keeney about seeing Tyler Henderson?
In reference to that one day or ever?
Ever. I was just looking at his statement. Isn't it true that Tyler Henderson had been to your office more than that Shockley time?
Or he may have been, but that doesn't mean I see him.
All right. So is it fair to say, well, let me strike it. Do you know the day Tyler Henderson came to see you?
Nope,
Was it in September?
don't know.
So if I said, was it in August, it would be the same answer, right?
Yeah, at this
Okay.
point, yeah.
All right. So at some point, Tyler Henderson comes and sees you. Whether that's in August or September, could it be October?
No,
Okay, August, September or October?
no, not October.
August or September of 2016, right?
Yes,
It's at a time where you know from living with Cindy that she is not working, is that right?
correct.
And up to that point, other than what you say happened in the Ocracoke trip, you haven't called my office or anybody to say that that was a fact, had you? Because she was not your employee, right?
Correct.
And isn't it true that at the time Tyler appears, you already know that there was information given to you, there's some SBI investigation?
Well, I also had just as much information that there was no investigation.
All right.
So obviously Tyler coming by to find me from all the way from Person County to Wentworth, that either Agent Whitley or Agent Mays had actually made contact with you or somebody at your office, pretty well confirmed that in fact there was an investigation.
So upon hearing there's an SBI investigation, what did you do?
Well, I was at the college, like I said earlier, probably saw him over a lunch break. I'm sure I called or texted you or had Tyler tell you to call me or something like that, whatever way I could get you.
And when you called or texted me, did you say, hey, Cindy, I haven't been working?
Well, you knew.
Based on the Ocracoke driveway? Is that right?
Based on what was she doing?
Okay. So back to that question. Is it your recollection that when you called me that you said that she was not working?
Well, I don't remember our conversation other than the SBI was looking into Pam and Cindy and their appearance and time at work was the thrust of it.
Oh, so your information either in August or September was that they were looking into Pam and Cindy.
I think I recall it was the wives, yes.
All right. And that information you say you got from Tyler?
I believe so, yes.
Well, as you saw the story develop, did you see anything about, initially in the first couple of months, anything other than Cindy Blitzer and Jay Stoltz?
No.
But yet your recollection is you heard it was about the wives.
You're asking me about a 15-minute conversation in the hallway almost 2 years ago. I'm telling you, to the best of my recollection, it was about the wives.
Okay. So was there any conversation between you and me after that initial conversation?
Well, I'm sure there was.
We've confirmed you didn't say Cindy wasn't working because you say, I knew. After that, what did you do?
No, I didn't answer. I didn't know there was a question.
After that, what did you do?
After
you
what?
Called me.
I probably reached out to Mike Grace, would be my guess.
The attorney that you had seen back in June of 2016.
Correct?
All right. And then after that, you would have sent him to talk to your staff, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Agent Whitley asked you in May about Tyler Henderson's salary increase. Do you recall that when he went into that position, which I'll call the shared employee, but you say is not the shared employee, that you adjusted the salary to be the same as what the previous amount had been for the slot?
Correct?
All right. Now, do you recall saying to the SBI that the reason Henderson received a higher pay rate had nothing to do with the fact that Cindy Blitzer was making closer to Henderson's final salary of $46,900? Is that right?
If that's what it says.
Isn't it true that you told the SBI that he continued to work in Person County and Caswell County? Is that right?
If that's what it says.
Okay, you don't recall.
I do not.
All right. And do you recall saying that you assumed that Tyler Henderson was being supervised by me?
I testified to that just now.
All right. And you told the SBI you did not know who would put the beacon time in the system for Tyler. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. Then you were asked about employee evaluations. Did you do those?
I guess. I don't remember.
And then after being asked about
As
employee...
a matter of fact, I'm sorry, I seem to recall that the DA's offices were exempt from those evaluations.
Okay. And then do you recall telling them that you guessed that Richardson would approve Henderson's time in the beacon system? Is that right?
As I've testified to now 3 times.
So you do recall saying that?
If that's what it says,
All right. So did you have any contact with Tyler Henderson after the either August or September meeting?
did not.
Okay. And when would you say the next time you had a conversation with me?
I seem to, I don't know, I'm sure we spoke, but after that initial conversation that must have followed my meeting with Tyler, the only conversation that really bears to mind is the one we had in October.
Okay. So before October, all right, tell me about that. Where were you in October? Is this the one where you're in the house?
Yes.
Okay. And anything else that you can recall about that conversation other than
No,
what
sir.
you said? All right. And then we don't talk again till when?
I think January.
So there's a break from the conversation where I say keep working on special projects and y'all mouth to each other. I don't know what he's talking about. That conversation, right?
Correct.
And when Cindy was let go, you don't recall a conversation with me about her having an attorney and not being able to talk to her boss.
We may have.
Okay? So we may have a conversation. Isn't it true that I called you and told you I tried to reach her?
Sustain.
Okay. Isn't it true that you and I may have had a conversation where I told you,
Objection.
Sustain.
isn't it true that you and I may have had a conversation about Cindy Blitzer's termination of employment?
Yes.
All right. And the reasons why?
We may have. I don't know what the reasons were. I know that you provided 2 letters of recommendation, so I couldn't imagine the reasons being bad.
Well, even as of the last communication, wouldn't you agree that you still did not say she was not working the hours she was recording?
No, you knew.
Ambrose and you were in BLET at this time frame, right?
December? What time frame?
Well, we were just talking about October.
Okay. Yes.
So all of these decisions, y'all still in school, right?
Well, I wouldn't call it school, but yes.
And then I call you out of the blue in January, right?
Yes, you do.
And during that conversation, is that on your home phone or cell?
So,
Do you recall how I start the conversation?
no, I do not.
Well, you told SBI the story about that conversation, didn't you?
I told them about the conversation, not
Okay.
the story about it.
All right. And in that, you describe a conversation where, well, let me ask it this way. What was that conversation about?
The conversation was about your pretext that you fired Ms. Holbrook because she couldn't convince her husband, the captain at the sheriff's department, to convince the sheriff to adopt the digital discovery program that anybody with a scanner could put in place in 30 minutes. You tried vehemently to get me to fire Mark Keeney because he wasn't loyal and was the mole in my office leaking information to the SBI, and that's why you fired Ms. Holbrook. You went on to tell me that you had a trooper who you trusted very much, who saw Mark Keeney, who we now know as Jason Ramey, in Senator Phil Berger's office, and that's why I should fire him. Then when you realized, or I realized you were wrong, I never heard from you again. Then I reached out to you a couple days later, and you told me, oh, I hope you didn't fire Mark Keeney. It was the other big blonde guy. Does that sum it up?
Well, it doesn't sum up the truth, but let me talk to you about it.
Objection.
Sustain.
The call from me was out of the blue. Is that right?
Yes, again.
Okay. And the last time we had talked was maybe regarding Cindy's termination. Is that right?
I'm not saying we did not have a conversation between October and January. What I testified to was the October conversation and the January ones stick out. It's quite plausible we spoke briefly, but clearly, based on what was being reported and aired, everybody was going to their own camps, so to speak.
So January, you know the date?
Not exactly, no.
All right. You remember about what time I called you?
My son and I just came back from paintball, so probably sometime in the early evening, 4:30, 6 o'clock-ish, 5:30. I just pulled in my driveway.
And at that point, you were still the elected DA for Rockingham, is that right?
Yes.
And what was Cindy doing?
When I pulled in the driveway,
What was Cindy doing with regards to employment as of that day?
he wasn't working.
Was she still going to school
Yes.
at South?
Yes.
All right. And you don't recall the first thing I said, or the first thing I said was talking about Debbie Holbrook?
Objection.
Overruled as to that question.
I don't think you opened with, I fired Ms. Holbrook because she's leaking information to the SBI. I didn't say that. I don't remember exactly what you opened the conversation with.
All right. Isn't it true you told the SBI that I called you in January of 2017?
But that's what I just said.
And isn't it true you noted to the SBI you knew this wasn't good? Is that right?
I don't know what that means.
Okay. Did you tell the SBI that you felt like me calling was not good?
I don't remember saying that.
Isn't it true you told the SBI that he said that he was trying to get the digital discovery up and running, and he had told Holbrook to convince the sheriff of Castle County to go digital with Discovery? Is that right?
I think that's kind of what I just said, yes, sir.
All right. But you gave some explanation to the SBI, too, about your interpretations of the statements, right?
If I did, then that's what they're, if I did, I did.
You told the SBI, isn't it true, that he told law enforcement agencies that he would not accept paper discovery anymore?
That's referring to me.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right. And you told him that you did digital discovery. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then, do you contend that I said that Holbrook did not convince her husband to get to the department to go digital?
Say it again?
That I did not convince her husband to get the department to go digital?
You did tell me that.
And you indicate that I said I had the right to be the absolute hiring authority. Is that right?
You did say that.
Isn't it true you also said that I said that Craig Blitzer should fire Keeney? He said Craig Blitzer should demand loyalty. Isn't that right?
Yes.
Isn't it true you told them that Wallace Bradsher went on, and he said that a trooper told him that Keeney was seen in Phil Berger's local office? Is that what you told the SBI?
Yes.
Okay. So, before I ask a couple of questions about that, the person that you ran against was Melanie Bridges. Is that right?
No S at the end, yes.
And she was the senior ADA for Phil Berger Jr. Isn't that right?
Correct.
And Phil Berger Sr., his father, has a law firm in Rockingham County. Is that right?
Correct.
And he's the president pro tem of the Senate.
Correct.
Okay. And the relationship between you and him and his son is not good, is it?
I'm sure it's not.
In fact, when you ran your campaign, you ran against the way the previous office was run. Is that right? Okay. So now you're getting this call from me late at night saying that I had let an employee go because of the digital discovery issue, and that Keeney was seen in Phil Berger's office from information from a trooper, is that right?
Correct?
So, what was your response?
To you?
Yes.
Oh, probably I asked you who the trooper was. I don't remember exactly. Asked you why you were not going to the sheriff himself over the discovery. Why were you going through one of your support staff to go to her husband instead of directly to the sheriff? I'm sure I asked you more inquiries about what you knew. Why was Keeney there? I'm sure that was a line of questioning I had.
And this is as of January now of 2017, is that right?
That statement or the conversation that you and I
The
had?
conversation.
Yes.
Yes, you're not talking to the SBI yet during this, is that right?
No, but you're reading from that.
Right. Chronologically, it happens January 17th, is that right?
January, I don't know the date in January. January 2017.
Of 2017?
Yes.
Didn't you find it curious that I called you?
Why? You
We
just
hadn't
fired,
talked?
you just fired Ms. Holbrook.
So we hadn't talked since before your wife was let go.
Probably,
And the SBI investigation was ongoing, is that correct?
as far as we knew, yes.
And you already knew that I had met and talked with the SBI, isn't that right?
Yes,
And you had an attorney and chose not to talk to the SBI, didn't you?
correct.
And then we go into the new year and there's these media statements that Cindy Blitzer and Jay Stoltz are being referred for further investigation, right?
I don't know exactly what time those came out, but they did come out, yes.
And you know Jay Stoltz didn't do anything wrong, did he?
I can't speak to that.
But you and Cindy had, hadn't you?
We all had. Me, you, Tyler, Pam, Jay, Cindy. We all had.
That's the story that worked for you at the end when you were facing so many charges, didn't it? That's what worked,
Is that a
right?
question?
Yes, isn't it true that
No, it's
that
not
last response was what you came up with after waiting so long before giving a statement because you and Cindy were facing so many charges
No,
that you decided to blame everybody else except for the two people that were going home every night, accepting the paycheck and knowing they weren't working?
no, that's not true.
All right. So I didn't call you again after that conversation, isn't that right?
I don't believe so, no.
And when you talk to the SBI, all this stuff about firing Debbie Holbrook because she was talking to the SBI, you didn't say any of that, did you?
Well, I was speaking to Agent Whitley, who I don't believe was investigating the termination of Deborah Holbrook. So if he didn't ask, I probably didn't tell him.
Well, did he ask you about the firing of Debbie Holbrook over a digital discovery issue? Because you
Whatever
told
he-
him that.
Well, I answered what was elicited. So,
So is it true then you felt it was relevant to tell him that I said that I let Debbie Holbrook go for the digital discovery issue, but don't mention he said I fired her because she was cooperating with the SBI?
if
When
that's
you're
what
talking to the SBI, right?
which question?
This is that first conversation that you relate to the SBI. You don't relate to them that I said I fired her because she was cooperating?
I didn't say I didn't relate to him. Whether it's in there or not, you'll have to ask Agent Whitley.
Okay. I'll do that. Now, you went on to say that Wallace Bradsher said that Holbrook did not convince her husband to get the department to go digital. Is that true?
If it's in there,
Okay. And that's it for the first conversation. You don't say anything else about she was talking to the SBI, right?
you say first conversation. I only had one conversation with Agent Whitley,
Well, you had a second call, right?
not with Agent Whitley.
the call to me. There's two calls, right?
You lost me.
I called you in January, and then you called me a few days later, right?
Correct.
Okay. So when you called me, what was the purpose of that call?
I believe I was either reaching out to you to something about more information about what Keeney was supposedly, who we now know wasn't at Senator Berger's office.
So you wanted to know more.
Of course.
And do you recall what you told me?
I don't recall what I told you, no.
And isn't it true that as you were talking to me, that I said to you, I'm sorry, I'll rephrase, Your Honor, I withdraw. Isn't it true you told the SBI, by the way, when he told Craig Blitzer that it was Keeney seen in Berger's office, he was wrong. It was actually another heavyset guy from Craig Blitzer's office. You recall telling the SBI that?
Mm-hmm.
All right. But I didn't give you a name, did I?
Keeney?
No, the first time you have said I gave you a name. Second time, isn't it true I didn't give you a name?
There's only one other fat blonde guy in the office. It was easy figuring out.
And then you said Ramey.
I don't know what I said,
Right.
but I knew who it was.
And did you relay anything else with regards to then ADA Ramey, now DA Ramey?
Relate to who?
To me. What else did you say in that conversation?
I have no idea.
So,
As a matter of fact, I'm sorry, I take that back. Now that you mention that, I remember being so awestruck that you wanted me to fire the wrong person for whatever reason and didn't call me to tell me, oh, I gave you the wrong name, so don't fire the wrong guy. And I'm pretty sure our conversation ended rather abruptly when I realized you wanted me to fire the wrong guy and for all the wrong reasons to make you less culpable with firing Deborah Holbrook.
and you told all that to the SBI?
If it's in there,
Maybe, maybe not.
maybe not, yeah.
And so it's your recollection that I said in both instances to fire these people.
No, you didn't tell me to fire in the second conversation anybody. You just told me that I hope that you gave me the wrong name of the person, that it wasn't Keeney.
Okay. So as to the second phone call, I didn't tell you to fire anybody.
I don't believe so.
Okay. So, in the second conversation, I didn't tell you to fire anybody. Is it true that you told the SBI he also told Craig Blitzer to fire Keeney? Is that right?
In the first conversation, yes.
And in the second conversation,
I just told you I don't recall you saying that.
isn't it true you told the SBI Wallace Bradsher said that yes, that it was Ramey, not Keeney, fire Ramey?
If that's what it says,
Well, that's what it says, but what you've just said under oath is you don't remember that being said, right?
that's correct.
That's a pretty important detail, don't you think?
If you think so. You're asking me to go back and pick out a sentence in 3,000 pages from 2 years ago.
Isn't it true that you've been provided information that I actually got information in November before this call as to who the actual complainant was?
I've been provided nothing.
And during either one of those conversations, there was no discussion of Cindy Blitzer's hours, were there?
No.
And you still were not talking to the SBI, right?
In January of 17,
Right.
correct?
And it's February, March, April, May before you do give this statement, isn't that right?
Yes.
So what's going on during that time? Are you going to work?
Up until March 10th.
And I call you anymore?
I don't believe so.
Cindy going to school?
Yes?
And then the search warrant, and then your resignation, right? In terms of time frame.
Yeah, but my resignation had nothing to do with the search warrant.
Okay. And then you and Cindy went in and made these statements. Is that right?
Not at the same time, no.
Been provided a document that outlines, from the state, that outlines a number of charges that were proposed against you and Cindy. And my question is, was that shared with you, let me start with, during the interview, SPI?
Never.
Okay.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
All right. Well, when you went in to tell your story that's put in the SBI document, that was pursuant to coordination by your attorney, is that right?
You have to ask me that again.
Okay. Were you advised that you're facing multiple charges, not just from the Cindy obtaining this property, but other academic fraud charges, using the computer for the courses, using the employees, all that?
In a document? If there's a document, I haven't seen a document.
All right.
Did I know I was facing a gazillion charges? Any defendant's facing a gazillion charges.
Okay. Fair enough. So you knew you were facing a gazillion charges, and you went in and talked with the SBI, and you gave them this statement. Is that correct?
Yes?
And then your plea deal, which we've already reviewed, the state showed, you pled to one misdemeanor with sentencing continued, and you have the chance at a PJC. Is that right?
Hopefully more, yes.
And Cindy, would you also agree was facing a gazillion charges?
Along with Miss Bradsher, Tyler Henderson, Jay Stoltz, yes. As I testified before, you and I became the targets, and everybody else was getting a pass. Cindy's pass was just memorialized in my plea transcript.
I see. And on the document, did you know when you were making the statement that Cindy faced obtaining property by false pretenses?
I could have figured it out, but whatever you're holding in your hand, I'm telling you, I've never seen a document.
Okay. Did you know that you were facing the assisting a student in obtaining academic credit by fraudulent means?
Never heard of it.
Just a gazillion charges.
Yeah.
And part of the deal to get the misdemeanor and the PJC,
Well, the
What-
PJC is not a done deal.
good point, possibility to PJC. Isn't it true that you agreed to cooperate in the civil case?
Yes.
And when did that offer get put on the table
What do you mean?
of helping with the civil case?
There was a requirement for the plea.
Because we've elicited a lot of evidence about the initial hiring of Cindy and Pam and the transfer and work, et cetera. And then, all of a sudden, Debbie Hallbrook is in this conversation between you and me. Is that right?
Yes.
And that's 4 months before your SPI statement. So my question is, you've had Mr. Grace involved since June of 2016. When do you start getting involved with the civil lawyers?
Civil lawsuit wasn't filed till March, so whatever January, February, and the first part of March, there was certainly, I had no knowledge of any civil suit
Okay. Well, in fact, you and I talked on the phone, didn't we?
after the civil suit was filed.
Yes. You've talked about 2 conversations with the jury that we went through. After the civil suit was filed, you and I spoke, didn't we?
After the civil suit was filed, yes.
And in fact, in that conversation, you reaffirmed, didn't you, that Cindy had worked the hours or was at the office available to work? Didn't you?
That Cindy had worked the hours up until March of 2016.
All right. So is it your testimony that when we talked, that you said Cindy had worked up till March 16th?
I honestly don't recall our conversation.
Isn't it true you still represented in that discussion on the phone when we were talking about the civil case that Cindy had worked or was in the office available for work during the entire time period?
I don't recall that conversation. And Cindy was not working after the Shockley file left the Rockingham County Courthouse.
Isn't it true that when we talked about the civil case, this was a desperate time for you and Cindy, wasn't it?
Desperate time for all of us.
You still had the financial issues. Cindy was not employed. You had the marital issues. Is that right?
I suppose they were paled in comparison to what else.
And now you're being sued over somebody that I let go.
Oh,
right?
the lawsuit was the least of my problems. That was just a creditor. That a bankruptcy filing could take care of that quick. That was I wasn't getting locked up. Nobody was going to jail over a civil suit. That's just money.
In fact, doesn't that refresh your memory that in that conversation you said, I'm not worried about this civil case because she didn't work for me. I'm not going to have any liability for that, right?
You keep asking, and respectfully, I do not recall that conversation. I know we spoke after the lawsuit was filed. I don't remember what we spoke about.
Do you recall in that conversation being very depressed and indicating that you were even contemplating suicide?
I do not.
Don't remember talking about this kind of stuff. Almost makes me want to go stick a hose in the exhaust and go end it all.
I don't recall that at all.
I understand you don't recall it. Do you recall that we talked anymore after that?
I think we exchanged some spiritual texts here and there, but, candidly, I'm sure you didn't trust me any more than I trusted you at that point.
So after that,
Let's go ahead and break.
Yes, sir.
Mid-afternoon break, and we'll resume at 5 minutes past 4, ladies and gentlemen. Please recall the rules and instructions I've given you. Leave your notepads in the chairs. Gather in the deliberation room at 5 minutes past 4. Everyone else, please remain seated while the jurors excuse themselves. Outside the presence of the jury, are there any matters we need to take up before we recess?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
All right, be in recess until 4.
What's this?